Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. After answering all the eternal questions in life, Albert took me on a series of out-of-body trips on the astral plane to visit the spirit realm and other fascinating places in the universe. I will describe how these astral trips with Albert began and what happened on my very first excursion. After my initial dialogue with Albert, he surprised me when he appeared unannounced one night in a very different way. I was sound asleep in my bed when I was startled by a strange noise coming from the doorway of my bedroom. I sat up and looked around, but at first I could not see anything unusual. And then I noticed a shimmering outline of a person standing in the doorway. When this ethereal figure got closer, I could see it was Albert in astral form. Albert said he came to take me on some trips on the astral plane so I could write about what I saw and heard in my next books. And much to my surprise, he said I must write 3 or 4 more books about my trips. I was happy to see Albert once again, but I was truly puzzled about the trips he mentioned because it was the middle of the night and I couldn't just get up and leave without telling my wife where I was going and when I would return. Albert explained that he planned to take me to explore our planet, other parts of the universe, and the spirit side so I could better understand what the source had created and how humans fit into the whole picture. He said I would travel with him in spirit form and leave my physical body behind. He confirmed I would be back in my body before morning and my wife would not be aware I was gone. Then he held out his hand and pulled my astral body out of my physical body, which was still lying in bed, sound asleep. I realized then that I was now in astral form, as Albert and I slowly floated upward through the ceiling and into the night sky. I felt light and airy, like fine white gossamer floating in the breeze. I could see our house down below and the lights of the city, which looked smaller and smaller as we ascended toward the stars. We continued to rise until Earth looked like a small blue orb floating in the darkness of space. It was breathtaking to view our beautiful planet from this perspective. Then Albert led me to a doorway floating in the inky blackness of space, which was lit up with bright, shimmering light. I could not see anything past the doorway, only a velvety blackness without any stars. We floated through the doorway to a scene on the other side that was truly spectacular. It was a gorgeous meadow filled with lush green grass and dazzling flowers with hundreds of different iridescent hues. Majestic redwood trees guarded the far edge of the meadow. The cloudless sky was a brilliant blue, and everything was bathed in warm sunlight. I could not see the sun in the sky, and it seemed like the sunlight emanated from everywhere. Albert beckoned me to follow him, and we walked slowly up a gentle slope. The verdant grass felt like velvet on my bare feet. My head was filled with a delightful, almost intoxicating perfume that wafted up from the flowers, and my body glowed from the warm light that enveloped me. When we reached the crest of the hill, I could see a group of people on the other side, gathered near the bottom. Behind them in the distance, I could see a city with white buildings that shimmered in the light. As we got closer to this group, I could make out many of the faces, and my heart skipped a beat. I recognized my mother, father, brother, grandparents, and many other relatives who had previously passed away. And then, from behind the group, a small black puppy sprang toward me, his little tail wagging his whole body. It was Oscar, our miniature schnauzer who had passed away several years before. I knelt down to greet Oscar as he jumped up to lick my face. I gave him a warm hug and told him it was great to see him again. Everyone in this group had warm, radiant smiles that lit up their faces as they approached me one by one to give me a loving embrace. I felt like I had arrived home after being away on a long journey. No words were spoken. It wasn't necessary, as the feeling of unconditional love that enveloped me spoke volumes. They all appeared to be healthy and happy, like when they were in their prime of their lives on Earth. They were obviously enjoying their blissful sojourn on the spirit side. Then my mother stepped forward, and I sensed she needed to tell me something. Even though Mom was still smiling warmly, I was a little apprehensive. While on Earth, Mom had been a very religious person, a devoted Roman Catholic all her life. She had faithfully followed all the rules of the Church and firmly believed that worshiping God in the ways prescribed by the Church was the only sure way to reach heaven. I was concerned because I had not been kind to the Catholic Church in my first book, Dancing on a Stamp, where I often poked fun at their many arbitrary and illogical rules and beliefs. And many of Albert's revelations disclosed in my book contradicted the Church and its principal beliefs. And I wondered now if my mother was upset with me for writing my book. But my mom gave me another warm hug and allayed my fears. She welcomed me home and told me to not be concerned. She said if she was still on Earth, she would not be happy about what my book said about the Church. But now that she had crossed over to the spirit side, she could see the big picture, and she agreed with everything I wrote in my book. She added that I had done a great job in conveying Albert's message to humanity. She confirmed that everyone in my family who had already crossed over from the Earth plane had made the transition to the spirit side safe and sound, and that the spirit side was truly a wonderful place full of love and joy without any of the negatives found on Earth. She noted that I was here for a short visit because I must return to Earth to complete my unfinished business, including writing more books so other people can read about Albert's revelations. She implored me to do my best to encourage everyone to treat all humans, all creatures, and Mother Earth herself with the dignity and respect that flows from living a life of love, forgiveness, and compassion. As well, she wanted me to be sure to comfort those who are grieving the loss of a loved one by reassuring them that all souls return home after their human bodies die, regardless of what they did while on Earth. She said the passing of a person on Earth should be a time for celebration, without any tears, as everyone will eventually be reunited once again on the spirit side. Albert had been standing quietly off to the side, watching and waiting, but now he motioned it was time to move on. And so I waved farewell to my relatives and followed Albert. Albert led me on a path through the meadow towards the gleaming white city ahead of us. As we got closer, its buildings, topped with domes or spires, loomed larger and more awe-inspiring with each step. Finally, we reached the edge of the city and stood before an entry portal, with spectacular white pillars topped by a gleaming arch. Albert advised that this is one of the cities on the spirit side known as Gaia. As we entered through the portal, I was taken aback by the amazing vista in front of me. The streets were paved with smooth gray stones that looked and felt like slate. The white walls of the buildings shimmered in the light and felt smooth and warm to my touch, reminding me of polished marble. The streets were filled with people, all with beaming, smiling faces that projected a sense of peace and joy. They all seemed to be going somewhere, except they walked with the leisurely pace of pedestrians who were in no hurry to get to their destination. The clothing they wore was stunning, with a variety of vivid colors in many different designs and styles. I felt like I had been plunked down in the middle of a glamorous costume ball. Some of the garments I recognized from history books. They looked like the clothes worn by people on Earth from many different countries and eras. I noticed saris from India, togas from ancient Rome, kimonos from Japan, doublets from medieval England, and flapper dresses popular during the Roaring '20s. Many of the outfits were unfamiliar to me, but resplendent nonetheless. I stood there, transfixed and totally in awe of the indescribable beauty that paraded before my eyes. Albert explained that souls on the spirit side do not have a specific gender, and they can choose to appear as either male or female based on the sex they identified with most often during their incarnations on Earth. Souls are free to change their gender at any time, or they can discard their earthly appearance and manifest themselves as globes of light. They will often dress in the clothes they enjoyed wearing in one of their previous lives on Earth, and they can change their attire as often as they wish. Regardless of what they wear, every soul is easily recognizable by its inherent energy pattern. Albert pointed out that the clothing that was unfamiliar to me was worn in some of the ancient civilizations on Earth that left no historical records. We strolled down this bustling street until we entered an open square with a fountain in the center, spewing forth a stream of sparkling water that cascaded back into the reflecting pond below. The plaza was filled with people strolling casually or sitting at tables. Off to the far right, I could see a choral group standing on a low stage. They wore flowing scarlet robes adorned with silver sashes, and the carol they were singing was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard, like a chorus of angels singing a song of joy. Their singing was so enchanted that Albert had to tug at my arm several times to break the spell. Albert then guided me towards a tall, stately building at the end of the plaza, a magnificent structure with Grecian pillars lining the front. When we reached the front of the building, which he called the Hall of Wisdom, we entered through the wide open doorway. At the end of a long hallway, we stopped in front of a grand door made of burnished brass, and Albert gently announced our presence with a round door knocker. Upon hearing the word "enter" from inside, Albert opened the door and we stepped into the room. It was large and circular, with a high domed ceiling. The room was well lit without any visible light fixtures, as the light seemed to emanate from the walls. In the center of the room was a table in the form of a semicircle, with the open section facing the door. The table was black and smooth, like gleaming granite, and it seemed to float in place without any legs or any other visible means of support. There were 11 people seated at this table, facing the center of the semicircle where Albert and I stood. Seated at the center was a striking woman with intense blue eyes. She announced that her name was Sophia, and she was the chair of this panel, known as the Council of Wise Ones. She said they had asked Albert to bring me to meet with them so they could give me a message for humanity for inclusion in my next book. She advised that I was on the spirit side, a place I came from before I incarnated on Earth. It exists at a much higher vibration frequency than Earth, and it can't normally be seen by people on Earth. The spirit side exists beyond the veil and is known to some people as home, the other side, or heaven. She confirmed that I will return here once again when my life on Earth is finished. But my visit this time would be short because I still had many things to accomplish before I cross over. She said the job of the Council of Wise Ones was to oversee all the incarnations on Earth. The Council provides guidance and counseling to all souls before they begin their lives on Earth, and they assist returning souls with the analysis of the lives they have just completed. The main function of the Council is to help souls design life plans that will enable them to grow and evolve through their experiences on Earth. They try to ensure that the lives that are being planned are not too difficult for a soul, which could hinder its evolution if it rebels too much against the harshness which it will encounter, or too easy without appropriate lessons to be learned and challenges to overcome. She said that all souls travel to the spirit side every night during sleep to consult with the Council and their guides, but they don't remember these trips because they pass through the shroud of forgetfulness every morning when they return to their bodies. She confirmed I would remember my trips with Albert because they wanted me to write about my experiences on the spirit side and the other places I would visit on the astral plane. The Council wanted me to tell everyone what I would see and learn on my journeys. They believed humans were ready for these new insights, which they hoped would help them make the shift to a new spiritual awareness. They wanted me to understand the transition that is now happening on Earth and its implications for my fellow humans. With a wave of Sophia's hand, a large holographic sphere filled with swirling blue and white vapors dropped down from the ceiling and hovered above the floor. The swirling vapors quickly dissipated, leaving behind a crystal clear image of Earth as seen from space. It was breathtaking to see our beautiful planet from this viewpoint. Sophia explained that Earth and its human inhabitants were at a major inflection point in their history. Humans are in the process of expanding their consciousness and transitioning to a higher vibration frequency, but they still need a lot of help. If this transition does not occur in a timely fashion, the consequences could be tragic for Earth and all of its creatures, including humans. This shift will allow all those who have increased their vibratory rates to make the shift to Earth in a higher dimension, a place often referred to as the New Earth, where the negative aspects of life on old Earth don't exist. The New Earth is a place where all its creatures, including humans, live in peace and harmony, without conflicts or wars, a planet filled with love, compassion, and forgiveness. In the New Earth, humans do not pollute Mother Earth, and they do not abuse the other creatures on the planet. And all the negative emotions that have been prevalent throughout human history, like fear, anger, hate, jealousy, and greed, are non-existent. Sophia said some humans have already made the transition, and many others are in the process of making the shift. Unfortunately, there are millions of humans who are not even aware of what is going on around them. She noted that human civilization is at a very advanced stage right now. Humans have created advanced technology that has made life much easier for most people. However, this technology has not been universally beneficial to everyone. Many people on Earth do not have enough food to eat or clean water to drink, and not everyone lives in a comfortable house, has access to the internet, or lives free from the fear of arbitrary violence. Furthermore, our advanced technology, with its weapons of mass destruction, can destroy all living creatures on our planet if used for the wrong purpose. Earth has been home to many advanced civilizations in the past, like Lemuria and Atlantis, and none of them has survived. Several were destroyed by the actions of some of their citizens, driven by greed and the lust for power, who used technology to pursue their own goals. And whenever these civilizations collapsed, humanity had to start all over again. Humans are now once again at a similar stage of development, and they are facing the same crucial test. Can humans avoid destroying their civilization so everyone will have the opportunity to transition up the vibratory ladder, or will they crash and burn like these other civilizations in the past? Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth, was becoming impatient with humans and their abusive behavior. She was weary of humans who mistreat her other creatures and pollute her oceans and rivers, her fertile soil, and her atmosphere with toxic chemicals, noxious emissions, and tons of unsightly garbage. She cautioned that Gaia is capable of fighting back, as she can increase the number and intensity of our natural disasters, such as earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, and volcanic eruptions, as a way of warning humans that they must change their ways. For humans to avoid destroying their civilization with their own technology, or being wiped out by natural disasters, they must hasten the transition to the new Earth by increasing their vibratory rates and making the ascension to a new level of consciousness. To do so, they must learn to control their negative emotions and fully embrace love, compassion, and forgiveness for all other humans and for Mother Earth and all the creatures who share our planet. That is why humans must be especially vigilant during these times. Those people who are enlightened must be diligent with their efforts to help other humans make the shift. Sophia asserted that I must do my best to make all people aware of the situation and encourage everyone to work hard at making that transition by writing about my visit here and the other things I would encounter on my journeys with Albert. She advised that the Council has been helping our cause in many ways. They have been increasing the pace of the messages they are sending to humans about the coming transition, because time is becoming crucial. Their messages are sent through many different channels and messengers, with the hope that more and more people will understand the problem and work on the solution. Increasingly, the Council has recruited more advanced souls to incarnate on Earth to assist humans through their leadership, wisdom, and positive energy. And many advanced civilizations on other planets have answered their call for help, and their assistance has been very helpful. With that, Sophia and the other members of the Council rose from their chairs, waved goodbye, and filed out of the room. Albert and I left the Council chamber and returned to Earth. where my astral body once again slipped back into my flesh and bones. After several trips with Albert to view some of the hotspots of pollution on our planet, I became quite concerned about the well-being of Mother Earth. I lamented to Albert that our beautiful, vibrant planet was in danger of becoming nothing more than a noxious garbage dump, and I asked him what I could do to encourage my fellow humans to stop abusing Mother Earth with their pollution. To begin, Albert said he would introduce me to someone who would provide me with plenty of ammunition. He noted that some people refer to Mother Earth as though she was a living person, even though most people think it is just a metaphor. However, there is more truth to this than I could ever imagine. Albert invited me to follow him so I could meet Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth. We dropped down through the clouds until we were hovering over the ice-covered northern pole. He guided me downward until we plunged beneath the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean, continuing our descent through the seabed until we came to a large underground cavern. The grotto was illuminated with a soft light that seemed to emanate from the walls without any obvious source. The floor of the cave was covered with glistening white stalagmites that pointed up at the slick, dripping stalactites hanging from the ceiling. I wondered why Albert had brought me to this underground chamber under the North Pole, but I soon found out. "Greetings, Gaia," Albert said at last to no one in particular, since he and I were the only ones in the cavern. He announced that he had brought a messenger with him who had agreed to disseminate her message to all of humankind. I peered around the cave, trying to see who Albert was addressing, but I could not detect anyone else. I was beginning to wonder if Albert had lost his marbles, until a gentle voice responded with a warm greeting to both of us. She said she was Gaia, known to some humans as Mother Earth. She confirmed she was a living entity comprised of all that planet Earth entails. Like other life forms, she has feelings and emotions, but humans do not understand this because human senses are not able to detect her subtle existence. Humans think Mother Earth is nothing more than a collection of inert molecules with none of the characteristics you typically associate with life. This springs from a very narrow view of life held by most humans, an attitude that will change as we expand our consciousness. She said she was appalled by the abuse humans have inflicted on Earth, the planet that provides a home for the human race. She could not fathom why humans do not seem to understand they must live with the consequences of the damage they cause to the environment. She lamented that she is wounded every day by the toxic chemicals humans spill into her rivers and the garbage we dump in her oceans. Humans slash and burn her magnificent forests to make way for our settlements, and our chemical emissions poison her atmosphere, which is the air humans and her other creatures must breathe in order to survive. She noted that humans extract hydrocarbons from her bowels and then carelessly allow it to spill onto her fields and contaminate her waterways as a result of a ruptured pipeline or a hole in a tanker ship. The pollution created by humans is not only a blight on the pristine beauty of Mother Earth, but it is also causes unmitigated harm to the other creatures who share this planet. She noted that it wasn't always this way. For millions of years, the human race lived in peaceful coexistence with Mother Earth and all her creatures. During those golden years, humans lived close to nature and understood their home was like a sacred shrine, a place to be worshipped as the womb of all life. In those days, humans shared a sense of oneness with Gaia, a unity that garnered mutual love and respect for all. And then it all began to change. At first, the transition was almost unnoticeable, a slowly creeping deviation from the historic norm as the human race developed new techniques to increase productivity and make life easier. The change accelerated at a geometric pace with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, and the situation has deteriorated ever since. Humans have become an invasive species, like a noxious weed that spreads its tentacles in every direction, smothering all life in its path. She complained that it was disheartening for her to watch this happen, not only for her sake, but for all her other creatures who ask only for the opportunity to have a peaceful existence free from human interference. It is unconscionable for humans, prodded by their unbridled arrogance, to stomp on other creatures as though they were insignificant pawns in the conquest of this planet. All her creatures have their own place in the universe, and their right to live on Earth must never be usurped by mankind. She advised that the solution to this problem requires humans to discard their fear and embrace love for Gaia and all of her creatures. Humans must expand their consciousness so they can move up the ladder of spiritual enlightenment. Only then will we all be able to live together in peace and harmony. She indicated that she was optimistic this could be achieved, although she was frustrated at the glacial pace of the change. So she has begun her own campaign to spur us into action. She has many arrows in her quiver, and she vowed to use them if necessary to awaken us from our stupor. She stated that we may have noticed a recent increase in weather phenomena that is much more intense and extreme than normal. This is because she has unleashed more devastating hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods than ever before, while the pace and severity of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions around the world has increased. This is just a warning shot across our bow. What our scientists attribute to climate change is really Gaia fighting back. And make no mistake about it, she cautioned, she is quite capable of causing terrible havoc to our civilization if she chooses. Gaia does not wish to cause unnecessary harm to humans. She only desires to preserve our planet as a sacred home for all of her flora and fauna, including humans. She noted that humans must undergo a radical transformation of consciousness, and this movement must spring forth from the grassroots of our civilization. Once the masses have signed on to the change, the upper echelons of society will be forced to comply with the will of the people. She beseeches us to change our ways so we can enjoy life in harmony with a planet that will be free from violence and abuse. Modify your behavior, humans, she warned, or suffer the consequences. The choice is ours. I stood there in silence, chastised by the onslaught from Gaia and embarrassed to be a member of the human race. I did not know how to respond because so much of what she said rang true. I followed Albert out of the cavern and back to our lofty perch high above my planet. This was a call to action for sure, and I hoped I could somehow rally the troops to avoid disaster. Albert said he was heartened to see I had gained some new insights about our planet from Gaia, but he wanted me to know she did not reveal all of her secrets. There was more to Gaia than I could ever imagine, and Albert volunteered to show me a couple of her hidden gems to give a better understanding of the complex world of Mother Earth. Then we headed toward the North American continent, floating down through the clouds and into the dense forests and mountains of the Pacific Northwest. We touched down in a small meadow dotted with wildflowers. Albert told me he wanted me to meet an interesting life form on our planet. Intelligent creatures who have coexisted with humans for millions of years without any open contact with our species. They have been the stuff of legends for centuries, often called Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or Yeti. These creatures have a highly developed sense of perception and can communicate by telepathy, which is why they will be able to see and hear us in astral form. I heard a rustling in the thick bush at the far edge of the meadow, and then a large humanoid creature emerged and stood in front of us. She was about 9 feet tall as she stood upright on her legs, with long arms hanging down to her knees. She had a big ape-like head with large round eyes that stared at us intently. Her body was covered with thick dark brown hair that glistened softly in the pale light from the moon. We stared at each other for several minutes until Albert broke the silence. He greeted this creature, who he called Zanna, and introduced me as a human in astral form who had many questions for her. I began by asking her what kind of creature she was and where she came from. She told me her species originated millions of years ago in the African continent. They were the result of an experiment conducted by a race of humanoid extraterrestrials that visited Earth frequently. They artificially inseminated the females of a large primate, which are now extinct, with their sperm to create a tall humanoid creature with an extra-large brain and enhanced sensory perception. That was the origin of her species, and her people eventually spread throughout Europe and Asia, and then to North America via the Bering Land Bridge. She said her people live on all of our continents, except Antarctica, in a peaceful coexistence with Mother Earth and all of her creatures. They eat leaves, twigs, roots, and berries, and do not eat animal flesh or kill other creatures. Her species has coexisted with humans for eons, although they chose not to have open contact with humans because they found humans to be too violent and aggressive. She advised that their enhanced perception permits them to communicate with one another telepathically, and this allows them to silently warn others about approaching humans. In addition, they also have the sensory capacity to detect and distinguish other creatures for miles around, kind of like an animal's sensitive radar system that allows them to spot and avoid any humans in their vicinity. They are nocturnal creatures with highly developed night vision, and during the daylight hours, they live in underground caves. All these factors have allowed them to avoid interaction with humans. She lamented that on rare occasions, some of her people have been careless, leaving behind footprints or allowing humans to spot them from afar. But for the most part, they have been very adept at avoiding detection by humans, which becomes more difficult every year as our civilization continues to encroach on their traditional territory. They dread the day when the truth about them becomes public knowledge to humans, for fear they will be poked and prodded in a lab or paraded around as circus freaks. When I asked her why they had not developed any technology, she said her race decided long ago to reject technology in favor of living simple lives close to nature. They wanted to live in harmony with our planet and all of its flora and fauna, and they feared technology would lead them down the same path that humans were following. They watched our human civilization develop its technology over the years, and they concluded that our technological advances fostered materialism and aggression and encouraged our unjustified sense of superiority over all other creatures. She noted that human technology has created sophisticated weapons that are very effective at killing animals and other humans, and this has led to numerous wars and violent conflicts. And our weapons of mass destruction could destroy all life on Earth in the blink of an eye. And even if humans do not destroy the planet with their weapons, they are slowly poisoning Earth with their pollution, which has increased exponentially in the last few decades. Zanna and her race were very concerned about the future of life on Earth, but they did not have any means to stop this death march. What is needed is a seismic shift in human behavior, a new paradigm where human anger, hate, and violence are replaced by love and compassion for Mother Earth and all her creatures, which they hope will happen before they all perish. When I asked her why they didn't take their message to humans, she said they did consider this approach, but decided it was unworkable. They do not have a verbal language, and humans have not yet learned how to utilize more of their brain capacity to communicate telepathically. So they feared humans would treat them as dumb animals that would be put on display in their zoos, and they would rather die than live in a cage. I did not know what to say. Zanna had hit the nail on the head for the most part. I was embarrassed to acknowledge the current state of human civilization, which this gentle giant had described with heartfelt eloquence. I told Zanna that I echoed her concerns. However, I said there was a ray of hope beaming through the stormy clouds. Every day, more and more humans are embracing spiritual enlightenment and discarding their negative emotions. And I sincerely hope this movement would someday change the course of human destiny before it was too late. I informed Zanna that I would do my best to tell her story to my fellow humans, although it is likely not many people would believe me without physical proof of their existence. I gave Zanna an astral hug and then watched as she disappeared silently into a dense thicket of trees. Albert tugged at my arm and I followed him back to my home. Before he left, he said that he would soon return to take me on a trek to the Emerald Isle, where I would meet an emissary from the civilization of little people that had secretly inhabited Earth for many centuries. When Albert returned, he told me he would take me to meet one of the mythical spirits in Ireland, commonly known as Fairies. I followed Albert through the wispy cirrus clouds that hung over Ireland until we landed in a small glen in the rolling countryside. We strolled beside a burbling brook of crystal clear water that sparkled in the sunlight. Before long, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, coming from behind a clump of trees. When I glanced in that direction, I could see nothing unusual, but Albert walked up to the bush and disappeared behind the foliage. Moments later, he emerged holding the hand of a little person who stepped gingerly at his side. The little one looked like a tiny human, no more than 3 feet tall, with an exquisite face peeking out from a fringe of golden curls that cascaded down to her shoulders. Her sparkling green eyes harmonized perfectly with her forest green frock, which was blazoned with tiny emeralds. She looked like a tiny, perfect china doll. Albert introduced me to the little fairy whose name was Brina, one of the fabled sprites of Ireland. I stood up and bowed, not knowing for sure how to greet a fairy. Brina smiled and held out her hand, which I grasped gently in mine. Her skin was soft and smooth, like a baby's cheek, and her grip was delicate. I stared into her eyes, enchanted by her beauty, until Albert broke the silence. He said he brought me there to satisfy my curiosity about the legends of the wee folk of Ireland, and Brina was living proof of the existence of fairies. When I asked her about the history of her people, she said they had been living on this land and the neighboring islands for eons. Before humans arrived, they had idyllic existence. They lived in peaceful harmony with Mother Nature and all her creatures, and they never fought or squabbled among themselves. She explained that they lived close to the land, growing vegetables and fruit and raising goats for their milk, but they did not consume animal flesh and treated all creatures with dignity and respect. Their modest needs were easily filled, which allowed them to spend most of their time singing and playing games. They loved to frolic in the forests and glens, dance to the merry tunes from their fiddlers, and laugh at the antics of their children. They had no fears or apprehensions about anything, and everyone enjoyed a happy and carefree life. But then their world was turned upside down when humans arrived on their peaceful little island. At first, they welcomed humans with open arms, thinking they were just like them, only taller. They soon learned that humans were very different from them. Humans were aggressive and violent creatures who fought among themselves and took what they wanted from the land without any regard for the fairies or the other animals in their world. Humans hunted and slaughtered the creatures of this island with reckless abandon, and they tried to enslave the fairies to do their bidding. Fortunately for the fairies, their wise leaders foresaw the looming danger, and they acted quickly to save them from disaster. They sent out a plea for help to the angels who watched over their people, and these special spirits aided their escape from the cruel clutches of the humans. These angels helped them build underground cities, and they showed the fairies how to tap into the energy of the universe to make themselves invisible to humans when needed. They taught her people how to manipulate matter and move objects with the power of thought. Brina said the fairies have lived in their underground cities ever since. They are still happy and carefree, but they miss the sunshine and the rain, the green grass and leafy trees, and the other creatures of their land. And because it is against their nature to be violent, they have never tried to rid their island of humans. Instead, they take turns making discreet jaunts to the surface to dance in the sunlight and breathe in the fresh salt air. She noted that fairies have been spotted from time to time when some of them have been careless. And on other occasions, they allowed themselves to be seen to help humans who had already rejected the dark side of humanity. Their ability to move objects telekinetically allows them to perform magic in the eyes of these humans. And sometimes their mischievous fairies will pull harmless pranks on humans to get a few laughs. When I asked Brina if there was anything I could do to help her and her people, she said I should follow Albert's advice and share his wisdom with other humans. She hoped it would be possible one day for humans to discard their violent ways and embrace love and compassion for Mother Earth and all her inhabitants. When this happens, Brina and her people will be able to return to the surface of their beautiful island to live in peaceful coexistence with humans. I was saddened by the plight of these little people who must live underground to avoid humans. I could see that fairies were resilient creatures who had resolved to live as best they could in the face of adversity. I told Brina I would tell her story to all who would listen, and hopefully one day the fairies could come out of hiding and once again dance openly in the sunlight. I gave little Brina a tender hug and watched her disappear into the thicket of trees. Albert motioned it was time to leave, and we floated up through the white clouds, leaving Ireland far behind. On one of my astral trips, Albert took me many light years from home to visit a brilliant blue planet that reminded me of Earth. Its surface was covered with an azure ocean without any land masses, with wispy white clouds gathered near the equator. As we dropped down toward the surface, I could clearly see the calm waters that sparkled in the sunlight, looking much like the oceans on Earth. We continued to descend until we submerged into the crystal clear water of this planet. Beneath the surface, I saw an underwater world that looked very much like that of the Caribbean Sea that I remembered from past snorkeling adventures. It was teeming with brightly colored fish, long black eels, and many larger fish that looked like sharks. The seabed was partially covered with coral and a profusion of aquatic plants basking in the warm light from the sun. Albert said that we were on the planet Proteus, which was entirely covered with oceans. And because it had no land masses above the water, all life on this planet was aquatic, and most of its species were similar to those found on Earth. He led me towards a large structure resting on the seabed. As we got closer, I could see that it was like the coral reefs on Earth, except very much larger. Near the base of this reef, I spotted two familiar-looking creatures. The larger one looked like a humpback whale, while the smaller creature reminded me of a dolphin. We were greeted by a soft, melodious voice emanating from the dolphin look-alike. She said her name was Aldine, and her companion was Horace. When I mentioned that they looked like the dolphins and whales on Earth, she confirmed that they were the same life forms as our cetaceans, because Proteus was where the dolphins and humpback whales on Earth had originated. Many eons ago, when Earth was very young, the Galactic Federation determined that its oceans were suitable to support life forms. So they seeded Earth with sea life and aquatic plants from Proteus. The Galactic Federation was the body of advanced races that oversees the activities on our galaxy. One of their functions was to seed life throughout the galaxy on planets that could sustain it. She wanted me to know that they continue to communicate telepathically with their cousins on Earth, even though they are many light years apart. Although these creatures on Proteus do not have technology as humans know it, they are very much further advanced than humans in many respects. They have learned how to control their emotions so they don't abuse one another or any other creatures on their planet. Negative emotions like fear, anger, and hate do not exist on Proteus. They live in peace and harmony with each other and with their planet, as they learned long ago that love will always trump fear, and compassion and empathy will allay the need to judge others. Because they had conquered their negative emotions, they were able to increase their vibratory rates and expand their consciousness to the point where they could communicate with their kin over vast distances. And although their water-covered planet did not have humans, they knew all about humans on Earth, and they didn't like what they heard. They wanted humans to know it is wrong to hunt, trap, and kill the cetaceans on Earth, as they've been doing for many years. They'd been listening to the cries of anguish from the whales and dolphins on Earth that have been harpooned by ruthless humans or imprisoned in water parks and aquariums. And despite the frequent attempts by the cetaceans on Earth to communicate with humans to get them to stop the carnage, their efforts had been futile. Humans, despite their large brains and advanced technology, do not hear these cries for help. Most humans have not been able to raise their consciousness to a level high enough to hear these pleas, mainly because they are too wrapped up with greed and arrogance. She implored humans to not think of dolphins, whales, and other sea life as merely unthinking, unfeeling animals to be used or abused as humans see fit. They are sentient beings who have been reaching out to humans for centuries, except all they got in return was violence and disdain. They understand there are many humans who oppose this brutality and do their best to stop the abuse, but these people do not control our planet. And to add to the perils their cousins on Earth face every day, humans have endangered all sea life on our planet by dumping untreated sewage, toxic chemicals, and other waste products into our oceans, lakes, and rivers. They lamented that they did not understand the unbridled arrogance of the human race, which acts like Earth was put there for their own exclusive use, and the other creatures of our planet do not matter. She declared that Earth and all of its other creatures do not deserve such abuse, and our planet would be much better off without any humans. They did not have humans on Proteus, and they enjoyed a healthy, balanced ecosystem without any pollution. She said when they had pleaded with the Galactic Federation for help, they were told they could not directly interfere with the activities of humans on Earth, but they could help us persuade humans to change their ways. Which is why they had invited me to their planet. They implored me to return to Earth and spread their message to the multitudes. I was dismayed by what I heard, as I could actually feel the anguish flowing from Aldine as she spoke. I knew this was a cry for help that I must answer. I gave them both a hug and nodded to Albert that we should be on our way. Albert took my hand and we rose up through the water and into the brilliant blue sky of Proteus. When this beautiful planet was nothing more than a small blue orb, Albert pointed his finger at the stars, and we emerged back in our solar system and continued down toward Earth. When I woke up the next morning, I knew my mission was to spread the message from Proteus to my fellow humans. When Albert next appeared in my life, I reminded him that he had promised to take me to meet some of the ETs that Sophia had mentioned when we met with the Council of Wise Ones. I asked him why the ETs couldn't use their superior technology to fix what is wrong on Earth. Why didn't they destroy all of our weapons of mass destruction clean up all the pollution, and get rid of all the nasty political and religious leaders who promoted conflict and violence. Albert responded by saying that all the advanced life forms in our galaxy must observe the directive of non-interference, which means that they cannot directly interfere with the activities of an inferior civilization unless it is necessary to prevent the destruction of a planet. They can help humans by giving them guidance about living peacefully without negative emotions, and they can provide technical know-how when appropriate. But they cannot just wave a magic wand to fix everything that is wrong with our planet. He said this directive was established by the Galactic Federation and is designed to ensure that all life forms can evolve on their own terms, even if that means some civilizations will end up harming themselves and other life forms on their planet. All life on Earth, including humans, was seeded initially by ETs under the direction of the Galactic Federation. They had monitored the progress of life on Earth from the very beginning, although they never knew for sure how it would play out. It was part of the grand experiment the Federation conducted on all the planets that were capable of harboring life. He advised that often the ETs have given humans help with their technological progress, teaching them agricultural, husbandry, and techniques for building large structures. They have also provided inspiration for inventions that have made life easier and safer for people on Earth. The ETs had been helping humans ever since the first person walked on Earth, but they cannot cure all the problems that humans have created for themselves. The ETs who have visited Earth over the years came from many different planets in our galaxy, and their civilizations were very diverse. And he invited me to travel with him to view some of them. I eagerly agreed, and soon we were hovering near a bright star that was a muted red in color. I noticed several planets circling this star as we swooped down towards the largest one. As we got closer, I could see the colors that dominated this planet: royal blue, indigo, and purple. We continued our descent and touched down on its gravelly surface. The sky was a light pink, with its red sun appearing to be about 3 times the size of our sun when viewed from Earth. There were no plants or vegetation in sight, only gently undulating hills that spread out as far as the eye could see. I followed Albert towards a small rectangular building hugging the surface. We entered this building and walked towards a large circular opening in the floor that led to a vertical tunnel beneath the surface. We stepped into the shaft and slowly floated down like feathers dropped from the sky. We descended for several minutes before emerging into an immense underground cavern that housed a cluster of buildings. The pale yellow structures, which emanated soft white light from their walls, were either rectangular with flat roofs or circular and topped with domes, with round openings for windows and doors. The streets were paved with smooth bricks that gave off a gentle green glow. We strolled down the main street toward a cluster of creatures standing in front of one of the larger buildings. They were not humanoid, but looked like spiders with piercing black eyes on a bulbous head that had 2 small antennae in constant motion. They were as tall as a human and stood on 4 legs, with 2 more appendages that functioned like arms. Their bodies were black and shiny, almost metallic looking. When we reached this group, Albert greeted the creature in the center, whose name was Kepra, and it responded telepathically. Kepra said their planet was called Xeron, and it orbits a giant red star near the center of our galaxy. He stated that eons ago, their planet was covered with trees and other vegetation when their species lived on the surface. But all this was destroyed by excessive heat and radiation when their sun became a red giant. Ever since, they have lived in underground cities. Kepra then turned around and led us into the large structure behind him. We walked up to a railing inside and peered down at a massive circular room about 20 feet below us. The room was filled with rows upon rows of horizontal circular monitors embedded in the floor, surrounded by dials and switches. Beside each monitor were 2 of the spider-like aliens who were watching the images on the screens. Kepra explained that they used their advanced technology to observe the planets in the galaxy to determine which ones were capable of harboring life. When their instruments detected favorable conditions for life, they reported this to the Galactic Federation, who would then dispatch other ETs to travel to the planet for a close-up look. If the planet passed this physical inspection, the Federation would initiate a program to seed it with life from other planets. He advised that this had been the first step leading to the seeding of life on Earth long ago. We were given a tour of the circular room, and Kepra did his best to explain how their instruments could detect and analyze planetary conditions many light years from Xeron. When the tour was over, we left the underground city and returned to our rendezvous point high above Earth. Albert then announced that our next stop would be an E.T. spacecraft in high orbit above Earth. I trailed Albert as we floated towards a large silver globe in the distance. As we got closer, I could see it was an orb about 3 stories tall with a smooth metallic surface. We passed through the hull and stood on the edge of a brightly lit chamber teeming with activity. The walls of the room were lined with rectangular monitors that looked like large computer screens, and dispersed throughout the room were several dozen humanoid beings who were busy punching the keys below the monitors. They were about 5 feet tall, with hairless gray skin and arms and legs similar to humans. Their round heads were fitted with large oblong eyes, with small vertical slits where you would expect a nose, and a horizontal slit for a mouth. Albert explained that these ETs were from a planet many light years from Earth. This spaceship was capable of faster than light travel, and their technology was vastly superior to anything found on Earth. We approached an ET who seemed to oversee the activities in this room, and Albert announced he had brought me to this ship to learn about their species and its history with Earth. The ET, whose name was Rama, said his species had been visiting Earth for many years, even before it had any life. When it was confirmed that Earth was capable of harboring life, the Galactic Federation enlisted their help to begin the long process of seeding life on our planet. They started with primitive life forms from other planets, followed by more and more advanced life forms. Eventually, they seeded Earth with humans. Rama said their mandate was to assist with the evolution and development of all life forms on Earth, except they were not allowed to directly interfere with the events on our planet. Their assistance was much more subtle. They could teach humans new techniques to help them move forward, and they could use their technology here and there to improve our way of life. But for the most part, they were passive observers. Because of the non-interference directive, they were forced to sit on the sidelines and watch many of our highly evolved civilizations, like Atlantis and Lemuria, rise up to their glory days before collapsing. Tragically, these civilizations lost sight of their core values and succumbed to their negative emotions. They let the dark side of humanity triumph over love, and they paid the price. Every time this happened, the humans who survived the destruction had to start all over again. It was difficult for them to watch these events, although they always held out hope that the human experiment on Earth would eventually work out. The foremost concern they have is that humans have technology that could destroy all life on Earth. Nuclear bombs, chemical and biological weapons, and other weapons of mass destruction are products of the dark side of humanity, the side that fosters fear, anger, hate, and greed. They have the capability to destroy all of our weapons, but are not allowed to do so. The shift to enlightenment must be done by humans themselves, with a little help from their friends. Rama said they carefully monitor all activity on our planet to detect situations that might lead to disputes or conflicts that have the potential to escalate out of control. In these cases, their goal is to scale back the hostilities with a program of intense telepathic thoughts beamed at those humans who can calm the discord and spread the peace. This has not always worked in the past, but they continue to improve their techniques to target the right people with their plea to discard fear and anger and embrace love and compassion. Right now, as in the past, some members of his race have been living on Earth disguised as humans. Their mission was to exert a positive influence on the humans around them through their words and actions, so that more and more humans would shun the darkness and welcome the light. As well, they had enlisted some of our people, directly or by telepathy, to communicate their message of hope to other humans via interpersonal contacts and broad dissemination to various media channels. They asked me to communicate their aspirations for humanity as part of their master plan. We waved farewell to Rama as Albert and I glided out of the ship to hover in our usual rendezvous spot high above Earth. I asked Albert about the spaceship we had just left and whether these ships were ever seen by humans. Albert said their spaceships are sometimes visible to humans, but only when the ETs choose to allow it. They can use cloaking devices to make their craft invisible to radar and the human eye. Sometimes they choose to be visible to people on our planet, as it is their way of gently making humans aware of their presence before they engage in full and open contact with everyone. I asked him about the people who had claimed to have been abducted and taken aboard alien ships. Albert said that the so-called abductions have been carried out by these alien visitors for centuries. There was nothing malevolent about these events. All of them occurred without any harm to the abductees and only for the purpose of studying the human anatomy and implanting communication devices. The goal of the ETs was only to help these people carry out their life purpose for the benefit of all humans. If the ETs had wanted to harm humans, they could have wiped them out long ago. Albert asserted that we should trust that the ETs have benevolent intentions and are proceeding with their own timetable. Someday, in the not too distant future, they will reveal themselves to everyone on Earth. But until then, they will continue to operate discreetly. Albert indicated that the ETs were following instructions from the Galactic Federation, which believed that open contact with humans would not be a good idea at this time. The Federation was concerned that most humans were not yet ready to accept that Earth had been visited by alien civilizations with superior technology, and this knowledge could lead to anxiety, social disruption, and even panic. Albert said the Federation was monitoring the situation carefully, and they would allow open contact when they think humans are able to handle it gracefully. Albert went on to explain how the ETs had been helping us over the ages by providing humans with information and techniques at crucial points in their development. They wanted to make life easier for us so people would not need to devote all of their time finding food and shelter for their families. They knew it would be difficult for humans to expand their consciousness if they had to struggle every day just to survive. So, from time to time throughout our history, the ETs have helped humans find new ways to raise their standard of living. They taught humans how to grow their own food, become better hunters and foragers, and make better tools and hunting weapons. With guidance from the ETs, humans learned how to organize their societies so that individuals could specialize in a trade or profession and barter with other humans for food and essentials. Hundreds of our noteworthy inventions, like the printing press, microscopes, penicillin, electric lights, and telephones, to name a few, were inspired by these off-world benefactors. Historically, most of this assistance has been very subtle. Quite often, these aliens would disguise themselves as humans so they could be of service without being conspicuous. Often they would send telepathic messages to gifted people to inspire the development of groundbreaking inventions that boosted our technology to the next level. Occasionally, they landed in their starships and used their superior technology to move large stones to build pyramids and other massive structures. Several of these encounters had been described in our holy books as miracles performed by angels. As I digested this information, Albert guided me back to my home for another day on planet Earth. On my next adventure with Albert, we hovered briefly over England before dropping down toward the University of Oxford. We touched down near John Radcliffe Hospital and waited near the front door. Soon I noticed a pert, neatly dressed lady in her 50s leaving the entrance with a brown paper bag in her hand. Eventually, she found a bench in the shade and sat down to enjoy her lunch. Albert said this lady was a professor at the medical school teaching classes in neuroscience. He said she was not a human, but a member of an ET race from a planet several light years from Earth. She had been planted here 9 years before, disguised as a human. Her human name was Amanda, but her real name was Temik. Her ET race had been monitoring life on Earth for eons, and they sometimes created human disguises to allow them to live among humans without being detected. This allowed them to observe human behavior patterns more closely so they could better understand how we functioned. Albert waved his hand over Amanda, and her human facade slowly disappeared, allowing me to see her natural state. She was a blue humanoid creature with large bald head and shining black eyes. She had arms and legs similar to humans, except she had 5 fingers and a thumb on her hands. She looked to be around 6 feet tall, and she wore a silver metallic jumpsuit that glittered in the sunlight. As soon as she was revealed to us, she smiled and greeted us by telepathy. I told Amanda her disguise was very effective, and I asked her how she could do it so perfectly. She said her race had a very advanced technology that was light years beyond human technology. They had been traveling among the stars for thousands of years, and they learned how to create realistic 3D holographic projections that allowed them to masquerade as anything they chose. When humans see her as Amanda, they are actually viewing her very lifelike human disguise, an illusion complete with all the physical attributes of a Homo sapien. It was so sophisticated that no human could detect her true identity. She said that living among humans on Earth, they were able to gain an intimate perspective on what makes us tick. They wanted to learn what motivates humans and what triggers their negative emotions. She noted that humans on Earth are unique among all the races in the galaxy because of our propensity to inflict abuse on one another, something that seldom happens with other intelligent races in the Milky Way. Toxic emotions like fear, hate, and anger are distinctive to humans on Earth, and they are trying to determine the cause. If they can discover what triggers these emotions, they may be able to find a way to suppress these feelings. Her race was doing this to help our civilization curb its abusive behavior before we ended up destroying ourselves. If they find a solution, they will pass this information to humans with the hope that we will be able to implement the necessary changes. Which is why she taught at the medical school, as it allowed her to explore the workings of the human brain as part of her research without raising any suspicions from the other staff. She confirmed that there were many others of her race who were engaged in similar activities throughout our planet. They sincerely hoped they would find a solution someday before it was too late. She implored me to continue to spread the message of love and hope from Spirit. And if enough of my fellow citizens hear this message and try to control their unhealthy emotions, it will buy them some time. She said they were not permitted to use their superior technology to stop all violence on Earth, but they were allowed to assist us by helping us find a way for humans to stifle their malicious emotions. I thanked Tamek and the other members of her race for all their good efforts. Tamek then morphed back into her Amanda disguise and returned to the hospital. Albert led me back up through the clouds to our usual rendezvous point high above our beautiful blue planet, which seemed to be suspended like a sparkling jewel in the star-spangled firmament. I told Albert I was delighted to know we were getting help from so many sources, but I wondered if we could really pull the fat out of the fire. I asked him if there's any real hope we could overcome all the obstacles we faced and achieve a truly peaceful existence. Albert said he was optimistic about the future of our civilization because many other human civilizations in the galaxy had learned to reject the dark side in favor of love and light. He offered to take me to visit one of these civilizations on our future trips, and I eagerly accepted his invitation. After my visit with Tamek, the blue alien, I prodded Albert for more information about E.T. activities on Earth. So he took me back to the Akashic records and waved his hand once again over the holographic globe. The blue and white swirls in this globe dissipated, revealing a bucolic landscape sweltering in the hot afternoon sun. It was a semi-arid plain with patches of buffalo grass, prickly pear cactus, and other scrubland flora. Albert said we were viewing the high plains of New Mexico, about 75 miles from Roswell. It was early July of 1947, and Albert revealed I was about to witness firsthand a much talked about historical event. I watched the unchanging scene in the globe for several minutes, not sure what to expect. Then out of the blue, a saucer-like object plummeted from the sky and smashed into the side of a small ravine. It kicked up a cloud of dust as it bounced up and skidded to a halt 100 yards past the initial impact zone. The scene in the globe zoomed in to provide a close-up view of the saucer. It was a metallic disc about 50 feet in diameter and 20 feet thick in the center. The outer edge of the disc was punctuated with a row of round portholes, but I could not see any other markings on its smooth surface. Albert focused the globe on the inside of the craft, which looked much like the cockpit of the space shuttle. There were 3 padded chairs aligned in a row in front of the instrument panel, and strapped into the chairs were 3 small humanoid beings. The little crew members were about 3 feet tall, with arms, hands, and legs similar to humans. Their hairless heads were slightly oblong in shape, with the lower portion descending to a rounded chin. They had large, oblong eyes, delicate little noses, and thin, pursed lips. They wore jumpsuits made of a shiny, metallic material and black boots that looked like synthetic rubber. Albert told me I had just witnessed the crash of a spacecraft piloted by ETs from the planet Gorgon in the Pisces constellation. They were part of an observation vanguard that had been monitoring Earth ever since the first fission bomb had been exploded, which had attracted the attention of this alien civilization. Their mission was to observe the activities of humans and report their findings to their superiors on their home planet. The spacecraft was a scouting vehicle based on a large mothership orbiting the Earth. As I looked more closely at the occupants of this craft, I noticed 2 of them were motionless, while the one in the center was moving its arms and emitting soft moaning sounds. The animated alien touched several buttons in the control panel, and I heard a loud swoosh of air as a doorway opened in the lower surface of the craft. The survivor tried to rise up from its chair, but the effort was too much, and it sank back down into the padded seat, unable to negotiate an exit through the open door. Albert waved his hand at the globe to compress time, and I noticed a small convoy of 2 army jeeps and a truck come to a halt beside the saucer. The officer in charge advanced cautiously toward the craft and entered through the open doorway. He quickly assessed the situation, and ordered the troops to carry the aliens on stretchers to the back of the truck. Once loaded, the truck sped off toward the Roswell Army airfield, while the remaining soldiers guarded the crash site. Later that afternoon, the saucer was loaded into a flatbed semi-trailer truck with the help of 2 large portable cranes. It was covered by a canvas tarp and hauled away to an empty hangar at the airfield. Then Albert shifted the scene to a secluded and heavily guarded hangar at the airfield. I could see a team of doctors working on the sole survivor, who now lay motionless on a hospital gurney. After several hours of intense procedures, the doctors realized they had lost the battle, and they covered the little body with a white sheet. I told Albert that I assumed what I just saw was the famous UFO crash in Roswell in 1947, and I wondered what had happened to the little aliens and their spacecraft. Albert confirmed that I had seen the famous Roswell crash of 1947. He said the little scout craft had been on a reconnaissance mission to observe a high-altitude surveillance balloon launched by the U.S. military as part of a top-secret program. As the spacecraft approached the balloon at a high speed, its advanced propulsion system inexplicably failed, causing it to crash into the balloon payload. The collision knocked out an essential component of the craft's guidance system, which caused the spacecraft to crash into the desert below. The military denied the existence of a flying saucer, despite several eyewitness accounts to the contrary. And when they displayed the crash debris to the media, it was indeed the wreckage from the balloon, as they claimed. What they didn't disclose, however, was the existence of the saucer that had crashed a few miles from the site of the balloon wreckage. Albert advised that the spacecraft was transported under heavy security to the Roswell Army airfield, and then to Edwards Air Force Base, and finally to the secretive military base known as Area 51 in Nevada, where it remains hidden to this very day. The saucer was constructed of a super strong metallic alloy that allowed it to survive the crash without any major structural damage. American scientists had extensively analyzed the alloy, but they had not been able to decipher its composition. Likewise, they had not been able to understand the nature of its propulsion or avionic systems. In short, the military engineers have still not been able to figure out how this spacecraft functioned. As for the crew of the scout craft, 2 of them died on impact from injuries to their internal organs. The third one survived for several days, eventually succumbing to its injuries despite the valiant attempts of the medical team at the airfield. Their internal organs were not too dissimilar from those of humans, but the damage had been too extensive and they had not been able to save the little guy. He said all 3 corpses were flown to Edwards Air Force Base, where autopsies were performed. Later, the bodies, still immersed in preservative chemicals, were transported to Area 51, where they remain today. The existence of the spacecraft and its crew has been denied and covered up by the U.S. government ever since the 1947 crash, because they believed the public did not need to know the truth. Albert said the mother ship was aware of the crash, but they were not able to mount a salvage operation for the scout ship or its crew. They were under strict orders from their home planet to ensure they were not observed by humans. Because of this directive, a salvage operation was out of the question in light of the tight military security around the wreck. And they were relieved when they realized their spacecraft would not be put on public display. When I asked Albert if the survivor had said anything before it died, Albert confirmed that it did try to speak to the humans who pulled it from the spacecraft, but its verbal language was unintelligible to the soldiers. The little alien did draw a small sketch on a notepad before it died. It was a dove holding an olive branch in its beak, which is an ancient symbol for peace. This was a fascinating story indeed, but I lamented that it had ended so tragically. Before we left the Akashic Records, Albert decided to show me another example of ETs leaving their mark on our planet. So he waved his hand over the holographic globe, and the blue and white swirls morphed into a new panorama. It was a flat plain covered with short grass and clover, with a few clumps of beech trees scattered here and there. Albert revealed that we were looking at the Salisbury Plain in England around 3000 BC. He said he'd show me scenes from one of my previous lives as a Druid priest, whose name was Fagus. As the scene in the globe zoomed in, I could see a solitary figure facing the morning sun. He was wearing a coarse hooded robe, cinched at the waist with a rawhide cord. His jet black hair and neatly trimmed beard framed a rugged face with piercing amber eyes peering out from a brooding brow. And then my perspective shifted, and I was reliving my life as Fagus once again. And I remembered now why I, as Fagus, was standing all alone on this plain. The night before, I had a very vivid dream where Andrasta, the goddess of victory, appeared before me to deliver an important message. She told me I had to journey to this spot the next morning to meet a special emissary from the stars, and I should follow his bidding. So I had hastened to this location as soon as I rose in the morning, eager to meet this celestial envoy. I watched as the sun rise slowly in the east until I heard a whirring sound to the west. I turned to see a large silver globe slowly descend from the sky until it was hovering 3 feet above the plain. After several minutes, the whirring stopped. A rectangular door slid open on the underside of the sphere, and a short staircase unfolded to the ground. Although I was fascinated by this silver ball, I was apprehensive about what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long before a humanoid being appeared at the door and descended the ladder. He looked like a human, except he was taller than any man I'd ever seen, likely 8 feet from head to his toes. His golden hair lay plastered to his large head in tight curls, and his hazel eyes sparkled in the morning light. He wore a billowing white blouse and a burgundy skirt that resembled a kilt. The bulging muscles on his arms and legs rippled as he strode in my direction. I stood there frozen in my tracks, unable to move, as I admired this specimen. This was, no doubt, the envoy I was supposed to meet. My apprehension faded as soon as he flashed a warm smile, his perfect teeth gleaming in the sunlight. He greeted me by name and said he was pleased I got the message from Andrasta. He said his name was Mogons, and he was from a star system in the Andromeda constellation. He said his race was closely related to humans on Earth. They originated from the same seed stock eons ago, although their physical attributes were larger in scale than humans because of the nature of the radiation emitted by their sun. Their larger brains allowed them to advance their technology more rapidly than my race, and their spaceships could easily travel throughout the galaxy. He advised that he was here to enlist my services as his point man for a cosmic beacon to be built on this site. He was not permitted to build it himself because the Galactic Federation mandated that these sites be built by the indigenous people who live nearby. But he could provide guidance and assistance to make the job easier. He informed me that a cosmic beacon was a navigational aid for interstellar travel. It would provide a directional guidepost for spacecraft when they were in warp drive. Planet Earth, and this site in particular, was on one of the galactic ley lines that made it a strategic signpost for travel to this part of the galaxy. It was necessary to build this beacon so his race and other galactic races could more easily navigate between the stars in this sector. Then Mogons unfurled a roll of parchment and spread it out on the top of a boulder. It was a diagram showing several concentric circles of massive standing stones joined by horizontal lintels. Inside the stone circles was a group of trilithons composed of two vertical stones topped with a lintel. The diagram contained details about the types of stones to be used in this structure and the location of the northeastern entrance, which precisely matched the direction of the midsummer sunrise for that location. The back of the parchment depicted what it would look like when it was finished. From my perspective in the viewing room, I recognized it immediately. It was Stonehenge. As I once again watched the scene play out before me, Albert waved his hand over the globe to speed up the action. In my Phagus persona, I had gone back to my village with Mogons to recruit the villagers to build the project. I explained to them that Mogons was a god who had come down from the stars to help them build a sacred site for worship. They were in awe of Mogons and quickly agreed to do his bidding. Mogons was very particular about the stones he wanted for his project. Blue stones and saracens from quarries in Wales. Although neither of these locations was close at hand, Mogons insisted on using these stones because they had special subatomic properties that were necessary for the proper functioning of the beacon. Because these stones, which weighed several tons each, had to be transported a long distance from the quarry, this building project would never have been completed without some technological help from Mogons. He provided me with two magical tools to aid the process. One was a laser cutting tool that could be used to carve the stone blocks from the wall of the quarry, and the other was a wand that could nullify gravity around any object. With help from these tools, my countrymen and I were able to easily carve out the standing stones and lintels and move them to the Stonehenge site, where they were placed with precision in accordance with the detailed instructions from Mogons. As the scene continued to unfold in fast time, the cosmic beacon was soon completed, looking exactly like the structure in Mogon's diagram. The final step was the positioning of the power source for the beacon, a small metal box Mogons had fetched from his starship. Mogons left once the cosmic beacon was finished, leaving the Druids to use the site for religious ceremonies and burials. Little did they know the stone circles played an important role in the navigation of our galaxy. When the scene in the globe reverted to blue and white swirls, Albert explained that Stonehenge had functioned as a cosmic beacon for several centuries, even though the local people used it as a ceremonial site. When the power source for the beacon was depleted, Mogons returned to the site to retrieve it. It was not necessary for him to install a new power source because he had built another beacon on one of the moons of Jupiter, making Stonehenge redundant in the scheme of things. And then Albert guided me back to my home to return to my physical body. On one of my trips with Albert, he took me to visit the New Earth, which is our planet in a different dimension with a higher vibratory rate. We landed in a broad river valley, lush with green grass, colorful flowers, and majestic sequoia trees. There was a village a short distance from us, hugging the banks of a broad, slow-moving river. The buildings were all 1 or 2 stories and painted in gentle hues of blue and green. The walls were constructed from a smooth, clay-like material, much like pottery. They had circular bases and domed roofs, with openings in the walls for windows and a door. The people in the village looked like humans from my Earth, and they were all lean, fit, and in robust health. They wore simple, knee-length tunics in soft pastel colors, with wooden sandals on their feet. There were children of all ages playing in the streets, and their infectious laughter resonated throughout the village. The adults, who all appeared to be in their 20s or early 30s, proudly displayed their golden tans on smooth, unblemished skin. Albert explained that these people were descendants of a human civilization that existed long ago in old Earth's past. They had lived on the old Earth in a wonderful era of peace and harmony for all people in their society, and they had respect for all other creatures and Mother Earth herself. And they did this without developing advanced technology, mainly because they had no need for it. But then dark clouds began to loom on the horizon as they discovered that another human civilization was encroaching on their territory. The other civilization was primitive and brutal, and there were many bitter conflicts within their society. The barbarians had developed crude but effective weapons that could kill people and destroy buildings, and they were inclined to use them frequently to gain material possessions or to satisfy their lust for power. This encroachment was a great concern to the members of the peaceful society, which had no weapons to fight the barbarians. So their spiritual leaders came up with a miraculous plan to save their civilization through a mass ascension of all their people to a higher dimension where they would be free from the menace. With guidance from Spirit, they organized a gathering of all their people in a large field beside their village. The enlightened ones explained their plan to the assembly and led everyone on a deep meditation by repeating a special mantra. Soon, they found themselves standing in the same field beside their village that looked the same as before, except their lookouts reported that the approaching army of Philistines was nowhere to be seen. They had achieved a mass ascension to a higher dimension, to the new Earth that was free of all negative emotions and free from all warlike humans. Albert noted that the humans in this village were the descendants of the people who had made that mass ascension. In this higher dimension, the people did not suffer from injury or disease, and they had learned to arrest the aging process. Typically, they would abandon their bodies when their souls wanted to return to the spirit side. The people of the New Earth only consumed liquid food developed from the many fruits and vegetables that grew naturally in their fields and forests. Their food was dispensed from taps located in every dwelling, freely available to everyone. They did not consume animal protein, and all creatures could live out their natural lives without interference from humans. Their food was perfectly nutritious and balanced, and contained very effective prophylactics to ward off disease, along with medicinal cells that helped to regenerate injured body parts. And because they had learned how to slow down the aging process, they could live for several hundred years. Everything they needed for a healthy and happy existence, food, clothing, shelter, education, recreation, and entertainment, was provided free of charge by their society. They had no need for money, and they didn't have any crime because there was no reason to steal or harm another human. All this gave them the freedom to pursue knowledge and happiness without having to worry about jobs or careers. Their people were not ruled by negative emotions, and they did not fear death, since they knew it was only a transition back to the spirit side. Without negative emotions, they were free to embrace love to the fullest. They treated all other humans and animals with dignity and respect, and they did not pollute their planet. They didn't have spouses or other exclusive attachments, and their children were conceived in special incubators by joining sperm with eggs that had been extracted from volunteer donors. Their adults engaged in sexual activities freely and openly, and there was never any jealousy or possessiveness. After finishing our tour of the New Earth, Albert and I rose up into the clouds and glided back through the dimensional doorway to hover once again above my Earth. Albert said he took me to the New Earth so I could tell all other humans on our planet that there was hope for much better things to come. The ascension to the New Earth was very achievable because it had been done before. Albert noted that the New Earth was not a future event. The planet exists simultaneously in several dimensions, each with different vibratory rates. The old Earth, which is the Earth that we now live in, is on the lowest step of the ladder, the dimension with the lowest vibratory rate and densest matter. The New Earth was further up the ladder in a dimension with a much higher vibratory rate. But the New Earth is not something that will happen in the future. It has always existed simultaneously with the old Earth. Humans living on the old Earth have vibration rates that match the vibration frequencies of their planet. If they want to ascend to the New Earth, they must increase their vibratory rates to match the rates of the New Earth. Some humans have already done this, and many more are working towards this goal. Not everyone living today on the old Earth, however, will make the transition in their current lifetimes, but their souls will return to the spirit side when their physical bodies die, because no one is ever left behind. Once these souls are back on the spirit side, they can decide if they want to reincarnate into a human on the old Earth to help the remaining humans make the shift or they can choose to incarnate into a human who has already made the transition to the new Earth. Albert noted that the new Earth still exists on the physical plane, only it is not as dense as the old Earth because of its higher vibratory rate. Humans on the new Earth still have physical bodies, although they have shed all their negative emotions and live in a world of peace, love, and harmony. On the other hand, souls on the spirit side do not have physical bodies because they are beings of pure energy. So while the new Earth has some of the positive characteristics of the spirit side, it is not the same. Once all humans on the old Earth have made the ascension to the new Earth, the old Earth will continue to exist, and it will go through a natural cleansing process to rid itself of all the garbage and pollution left behind by humans. When this has been completed, the old Earth will be ready once again to accept new life forms to nurture and grow. These new life forms will be seeded by ETs under the direction of the Galactic Federation, and a new cycle will begin. As I pondered this thought, Albert led me back down to Earth and back into my bedroom. I told Albert I was eager to continue my adventures with him so I could find a way to help my fellow humans make the ascension before it was too late. On yet another trip with Albert, we went to a green planet that looked like Earth, except the land masses were different. We headed toward a city in the distance with its gold and silver tower spires reaching towards the clouds. When we reached the main entrance to the city, I could see that the streets were filled with tall humans with dark brown hair, green eyes, and bronze complexions. The men wore identical black jumpsuits made from a soft and supple fabric, with shiny black boots covering their feet and ankles. The women all wore silver jumpsuits made from a metallic fabric, along with soft white boots that rose up past their calves. The people were riding on this moving people conveyors that lined the edges of the street, one going in each direction. Overhead, I could see dozens of flying vehicles of various sizes that sped between the gleaming towers. Albert and I headed toward the center of the city and strolled toward the large, imposing edifice at the far edge of a public square. Albert explained that we were on the planet Thraso. The building we entered was the seat of the government for this civilization, and he had brought me here to meet the reigning empress, Marpesia. When we entered a large room, we noticed a regal woman seated on a gold throne. She motioned for us to approach and be seated on two royal blue chairs lined up in front of her throne. The empress said their planet was a matriarchal society governed solely by women, who held all the political offices in their society, as well as all the decision-making and managerial positions in education, commerce, and science. Men were subservient to women in every sense, but they were not treated harshly. The women did not subjugate or abuse the men, but the men were not allowed to assume any position of importance. The men were free to work at menial jobs, or they could spend all their time in artistic and recreational activities. They could roam their streets and the countryside with impunity and live free and happy lives. The men were treated with kindness and compassion, and they did not lack any material comforts. Their society was democratic and egalitarian for all women. The members of their governing council were elected every 4 years by the women, but the men were not allowed to vote. The Empress noted that they had a non-violent society with no crime, conflicts, or wars. Every citizen had free access to everything they needed for nourishment, shelter, and entertainment, so there was no jealousy over status or material possessions. They were able to immunize themselves from all known diseases, and their medical science had become very adept at healing injuries caused by accidental traumas. And because they had learned how to slow down the aging process, the life expectancy for their people was around 140 years. They lived in peace and harmony with their planet and all its creatures. They did not pollute their environment and did not eat animal flesh. They ingested food pills manufactured from vegetation, which provided all the nourishment needed for a healthy diet. She said the key to the success of their society was their program to reduce testosterone levels in the men. They sterilized all boy children when they were 3 years old using a painless chemical treatment, although they excluded some of the boys so they could harvest their sperm for the sperm banks. The reduced testosterone levels in their males made them docile and non-aggressive. As a result, they never harmed other humans and were not prone to engage in fighting or other acts of violence. The harvested sperm was used to artificially incubate eggs in one of their birthing centers. The babies were lovingly cared for by their nursing staff and then educated by the women instructors in their schools, but they never got to know the identity of their biological parents. Girls were educated separately from the boys to ensure they were taught the leadership skills they would need when they became adults. Women and men did not form relationships or engage in sex. The men were totally uninterested in sex, while the women, if they were so inclined, could enjoy sexual activities with other women. The men did not miss their sex drive because they never remembered having it. They were raised in a society where all women made all the decisions and assumed all the responsibilities, and the men thought this was the natural order of things. But their society was not always like this. Several thousand years ago, they were a patriarchal society ruled by aggressive and violent men who cruelly subjugated women and treated them like chattels. In those days, their society was rife with crime and violence, and wars were a common occurrence. It was truly a nasty society, especially for the women. The Empress said this all changed when one of their women had a vision one night while sleeping that told her a plant that grew in their forest would drastically reduce the testosterone level of any man who ingested its leaves. So repetitiously, over a period of several years, the women fed this plant to their men. The results were astonishing as women gradually converted their society from one ruled by violent men to one governed by kind and compassionate women. The Empress conceded that the women did have some disagreements, but they were always settled peacefully. And because everyone in their society had free access to all the material goods they could possibly need or want, there were very few reasons to quarrel. After hearing all about their society, I felt an urgent need to leave this planet before they decided I should experience the joys of being a eunuch in this world. We bade farewell to the Empress, and Albert guided me back to my home on Earth. He said he would return in a few days to take me to visit another human civilization that had achieved equality between men and women in all respects. When Albert returned, he took me to a planet called Gamma, which was home to a super intelligent race of humans who had developed very advanced technology, including spacecraft that could travel to other star systems. We dropped down through the scattered clouds toward one of their cities that sprouted gleaming towers made of a shiny metal that looked like chrome, punctuated by rows of windows. The streets were paved with a smooth gray rock resembling granite and were filled with people strolling casually or riding the moving walkways that crisscrossed the city. The citizens looked like humans on Earth, with a variety of hair colors and skin tones scattered among the throngs. They all wore the same type of clothing in a multitude of colors, consisting of a short, military-like tunic, skin-tight leggings, and supple boots that rose halfway to their knees. In one of their parks, Albert led me toward a pair of benches facing each other in the shade of a large tree with variegated leaves. Soon a regal female in a gold tunic and white leggings sat on a bench opposite ours and flashed a warm smile. She greeted us telepathically and said her name was Jophiel. She said the people on her planet were humans, just like the ones on Earth, except their civilization was very different. Long ago, their civilization had been brutal and aggressive, and they had suffered through many wars and savage conflicts. But then, their scientists discovered that the cruel and aggressive people suffered from a common defective gene, and they were able to gradually rid their population from this affliction through genetic engineering. Now they had no violence or crime, and they lived in peaceful harmony with one another. And because their technology was very advanced, they all enjoyed everything they needed for a happy and fulfilled life, all courtesy of their society, which supplied all the food, shelter, recreation, and entertainment they required. Their people didn't have to work for a living, and they had no need for money. Their education was provided for by their society, and they were free to pursue their interest in one of the career paths available on their planet. She said they all cheerfully pitched in to support their society to the best of their abilities, but there was no hierarchy or pecking order. They were all equal citizens, and no one got special treatment. As a result, there was no jealousy, greed, or competition among the people, and crime was non-existent. All their citizens had identical living quarters, and they all wore the same clothes, so no one stood out or had an advantage over anyone else. This made for peaceful coexistence without any petty jealousies or ego-driven competitions. She said all the people on their planet were robust, fit, and healthy. This was the result of their genetic engineering, which had also eliminated the genes that previously made them susceptible to disease, physical handicaps, and the natural aging process. So they could live for hundreds of years without any physical deterioration to their bodies. Unless they perished in a natural accident on their planet or elsewhere in the galaxy, they died when they felt it was time to move on by entering special departure chambers that vaporized their bodies and allowed their souls to return to spirit. All their people were perfectly proportioned, with no excess body fat, thanks to a miracle diet pill developed years ago. This pill allowed them to consume as much food as they liked without being concerned about the intake of calories or cholesterol levels. They manufactured food without killing any animals that was indistinguishable from the food they used to make from animal flesh. And by ingesting the diet pill, they could eat whatever they desired without gaining any weight or otherwise affecting their health. They were not allowed to give me the formula for making this miracle pill because they were forbidden to do so by the Galactic Federation, as it would be too disruptive to our civilization on Earth. She said that someday, if we don't destroy ourselves first, our scientists on Earth will discover the secret to making this pill on their own. She told us that they had been visiting Earth for many years to observe our development. They knew that humans on Earth were at the same stage of development that her society was in long ago. They had managed to pull through, and she hoped that we could do so as well. But it was something humans on Earth had to figure out for themselves. Like all other advanced races in the galaxy, they operated under the prime directive of the Federation that dictated they could not interfere with our evolution by giving us advanced technology before we were ready to deal with it in a responsible manner. She truly hoped that humans on Earth could turn the corner and learn to curtail their aggressive behavior before they destroyed themselves. But she cautioned that we would have to do it ourselves, as they were not permitted to give us a magic bullet to solve all of our problems. Then we waved farewell to Jophiel and rose up through the clouds on our way back to Earth. Thank you for watching.